Today I followed a quiet nudge into a place called Whimsical Woods. What I found wasn't just a trail, it was a doorway, a small entrance that opened into something entirely different. The space felt like a meeting point between the seen and the unseen, where nature, creativity, and awareness come together. Every element held something: the trees, the textures, the placement of objects, the way the path moved. Nothing felt random. It became clear that this wasn't just a place to walk, it was a place to remember how to perceive, to notice how energy expresses through form, to feel how nature holds intelligence, to recognize that portals don't always look dramatic. They often appear as subtle invitations to step into a different awareness. Following intuition led me here. As I entered the space, I began to notice the way everything had been shaped. Some of it carved directly from what was already there. Tree stumps transformed into something expressive, as if the form had always been waiting inside. Other pieces had been placed intentionally, small creations, objects, and forms that felt both whimsical and meaningful. Things that had been brought in, arranged, and offered to the space, and yet nothing felt out of place. It wasn't just what had been created, it was how it existed within the environment. It blended with the trees, resting with the ground, blooming and becoming part of the landscape itself. There was no clear line between what was natural and what had been shaped by hand, only a sense that everything belonged, as if what had been added and what had always been there were part of the same expression. A guitar made from wood, unexpected, almost playful, a reminder of music. A bench with wolves carved, rabbits hanging gently from the trees, each piece catching my attention in its own way. And as I moved through it, something shifted. It became clear that I wasn't just walking through a place. I was being asked to pay attention. There was a sense that what I was seeing wasn't random, and that there was something to notice, something to recognize. Shortly after, I came across a stump where small figurines had fallen over, and without thinking, I reached down and stood them back up. A simple action, but it felt like a response. Like I had moved from observing into participating. Then at the center of a large tree stump, there was a single tiny fairy, so small it could have been missed entirely. And yet, it felt like it was the center of everything. Walking into this place felt like walking into a threshold. Not because anything physically changed in a dramatic way, but because my awareness shifted the moment I stepped through. A portal isn't always a place. It's a change in the way that you perceive the world, and that it opens you up to what was already there. There was nothing that I was trying to figure out while I was there. Everything just made sense without explanation. The more that I allowed myself to just move, notice, and experience, the more coherent it all felt. It wasn't about understanding. It was about just allowing myself to perceive the way things were coming across to me. What felt most present was something that isn't usually acknowledged. It was as if the unseen aspects of the world had been given form through art, through nature, through intention. It wasn't there to prove anything, it was just there to be noticed. There was no effort required to enter this space, no preparation, no ritual, just a step forward. And that's what stood out most, how accessible these experiences actually are when you follow what feels true. Everything felt interconnected without needing to be explained. Nature, creativity, awareness, movement, It all existed together without separation. It showed me that coherence doesn't come from forcing things together. It comes from recognizing how they already are. As I walked, I began to notice familiar symbols, things that have been showing up in my life recently. Rabbits, shells, plants, butterflies, lions. And it became clear I wasn't just seeing them, I was recognizing them. They weren't random objects. They were reflections of something already active in my awareness. Certain forms have been appearing again and again in my experience. And when something repeats, it begins to speak. It's not speaking through words, but in recognition. And it's not about assigning a meaning to them, it's about noticing. It's about being aware, about what continues to meet you wherever you are. What I saw in that space wasn't separate from me. It felt like what I've been sensing internally was being shown externally, as if the environment was reflecting patterns, themes, and awareness that's already unfolding within me. I didn't need to figure out what anything meant. The recognition came first, and that recognition carried its own clarity. When something is truly aligned, it doesn't need explanation. It just resonates. These symbols didn't suddenly appear because I entered the space. They became visible because I was aware enough to see them. And that kind of changes everything, because it shifts the experience from "this is happening to me" to "I am perceiving what is already present." Each person begins to notice their own patterns, their own symbols, their own forms that repeat and reappear. This becomes a kind of language, not one that's learned, but one that is recognized over time through awareness. The more I noticed, the more there was to notice, not because anything else changed, but because my attention itself opened my perception. And when my perception opens, the world becomes more expressive. Nothing I saw was hidden. It was all there. But it required a certain level of presence to be seen as meaningful. And once that presence was there, everything began to feel intentional. What we notice isn't random. It reflects what we are ready to see. As I continued walking, the same symbols kept appearing: rabbits, fairies, small hidden spaces. These aren't new to me. They've been part of my awareness for a long time. In fact, they've been with me since childhood. And what I'm beginning to understand is that they were never just my imagination. They were part of an awareness that was already there, something I was naturally connected to before I had language for it. Looking back, I can see what I've been calling my awakening or self-development didn't begin recently. It's been there my entire life. These symbols stayed with me quietly, consistently. They weren't something that I was trying to hold on to, just something that never actually left. As we move into adulthood, we're often taught to set those things aside, to see them as imagination or something that we outgrow. But they don't leave. They just wait. And as awareness deepens, they begin to reappear, not as something new, but as something we're ready to recognize again. There are things that we're naturally aware of as children, not because we're taught, but because we haven't yet been taught to ignore them. And for me, these symbols, fairies, rabbits, small intentional spaces, they've always been a part of that awareness. So when I saw a fairy holding a rabbit today in this little wooded area, it didn't feel surprising. It felt consistent. It felt like a continuation of something already unfolding. Not something I discovered, but something that I recognized. This isn't something I'm learning for the first time, it's something I'm remembering. As my walk continued and I was noticing small spaces within the trees, openings, hollows, or places that felt like they led somewhere beyond what was immediately visible. They reminded me of portals. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, familiar sense, like entrances into something I've always known exists. For a moment, I could feel how easy it is to begin seeing these things as separate, as something other, something outside of us, something to find or access. But what became clear is that they're not separate. They don't exist somewhere else, waiting to be entered. They're a part of the same field of awareness we are already within. The shift isn't stepping into a different world. It's recognizing that what we perceive as hidden or unseen has always been present, just outside the way we've been taught to look. These spaces didn't take me somewhere new. They reflected something already here. A portal isn't a place you go. It's a way of seeing what has always been there. More walking moves me to more hidden symbols, something larger, more defined, a carved lion, a reminder of strength and force, a knowing of the self that didn't need to prove anything. The broken fairies on the ground. Without thinking, I reached down and stood them back up. It felt simple and meaningful, like restoring something that had been overlooked or forgotten. It just felt right. Then I was led to a carved dragon on a stump. It carried a different kind of energy, movement, current, flow. A reminder that energy is always moving, always circulating, whether we see it or not. And then came the tortoise, one that felt deeply familiar, a reminder of the earth herself moving in her own time, holding everything with urgency. I came upon a hippopotamus with only the top of his head visible as if it were emerging from beneath the surface, and that moment felt like something rising, something that had always been below awareness, beginning to come into view. Each form carried a different expression, but together they revealed a deeper movement already unfolding. The path drew me deeper into the quieter spaces, more tucked away, more natural. The whimsical feeling was still there, but it began to shift. It felt less like something placed and more like something revealed. There were still some of those little knickknacks hidden away, those whimsical elements that drew me in. And it felt like they were all there for a reason, sharing something, not in words, but the way they appeared, the way they grew, and the way they held themselves in the space. The May-apples were beginning to emerge, small, umbrella-like forms spreading gently over the ground. In that moment, they felt like they were there creating shelter, not just for what we see, but for what we often don't see. A quiet protection, soft covering. There was a pause here, a space for me where nothing needed to stand out, and yet everything felt so much more present. The ground, the air, the space between each form, all holding the same quiet expression. Then the trilliums, just beginning to show their leaves. They stood out, subtle, delicate, almost easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. Yet, it was completely intentional. The deeper I moved, the more it became clear. Nothing here was random. Everything was expressing itself exactly as it was meant to be seen. The symbols continued. The fairy house with the W's. Familiar forms appearing again and again. A dog guarding the hollow stump, showing me the spaces that feel protected, that aren't hidden, but they are held. Continued understanding that both what we appear to see as living and not living were coming together in this space. There were butterflies in the tree, symbols of movement and transformation, presence, bells, subtle signals that call attention without force. All of this repeats, but it's not random. It's just what my awareness recognizes. Life is emerging all around me. It's not separate from what I've been seeing, just growing within it. The earth continues quietly, steadily, holding both the seen and the unseen at once. In this moment, I can feel it clearly. There's no separation here, only expression, only emergence, only what has always been revealing itself. As I walk toward the exit, I can feel that this experience doesn't remain behind me. It's not tied to this place. It's something I now carry, a way of seeing what moves with me. And as I arrive at the threshold, I remember there are many doorways. As I move forward, the path brings me back to what has always been there, the rabbit, a quiet guide moving between what is seen and unseen, a reflection of the way I've always known how to move, even before I understood it.